there are women who definitely feel like less of a woman because they can't have children. And I think that a sterile man would probably feel like less of a man as well.
Yeah, but we don't want people to feel that way. Don't you think that? Don't you
I don't
think?
know. I'm just trying to. You can, yeah, I agree
Wait.
that it's not nice.
On that particular
right,
thing,
they feel
do
that
you
way.
want do you think it would be good, or do you want society to feel like if a man can't have a child, he should view himself as less of a man?
If a woman in standard usage of English or just any language, which going back into the midst of time has been adult human female, then that is a biologically essentialist word. That's the purpose of it. It's designed to reflect a physical biological reality.
There you go. It is. So we have categories that we've created because we believe that they reflect some underlying physical reality. The concept of female, that isn't a real thing. That's not something that exists in nature. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I don't agree with you.
Okay. If we eliminate all human beings, where do you find the concept of female?
In the animal world, I suppose.
No, you don't. You can find some things because what you have is you have some things that have collections of certain features, and if we want, we can label them in certain ways, right? And that's what we do as people. We label things because we get some value out of it. We have people that generally have vaginas, can give birth to people. We've got people that generally have dicks that fuck people, right? We call some of these females. Yeah, we call some of these females, we call some of these males. But there is nothing in science that says we must have this category of female, we must have this category of male, or that we must define them in any particular way.
That we need to think about there. Science can only tell us data. We need to be able to interpret that, and for that we need philosophy.
Exactly. So philosophically, when we're creating these categories, we have to understand that the reason at the end of the day we create these categories like male and female isn't because science tells us to, because science can never make these kinds of claims. It's because we as a society have decided we want this definition because it makes all of us happier. That's generally how everything works in reality.
No.
It's not how I think about any of my moral statements. Like if I were to think, if somebody were to come to me like, hey, do you think that like how should we treat animals, or how should we treat some group of people? Like my go-to is never like, well, in history, like how do they do it?
The idea that bigotry is simply hate, I call the Westboro Baptist Church theory of bigotry. It's the idea that bigots are people who outright say, we hate you, God hates you, and we're all marching around with signs about how much we hate you, like the bad guys in that Taylor Swift video. Taylor Swift. Everyone wants to be a gay icon now. Well, I don't. I don't want to be a
Wait, is Taylor Swift gay? Is that a thing I missed?
Gay icon. I'm just stuck with you people.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding. Shade never made anybody less gay. This isn't shade, Taylor. Shade is JK Rowling telling trans people, sleep with any consenting adult who will have you. Bigotry is a lot more complicated than just hate. And the video for You Need to Calm Down is just so emblematic of this misconception. Taylor takes the subject of homophobia and turns it into yet another song about haters. But in the real world, backwoods hillbillies stomping around with misspelled signs are not really the problem. The most dangerous bigots are highly sophisticated and powerful people. And yeah, there are still blatant homophobes who say it's an abomination, these perverts are spreading AIDS, they're destroying the family, they're recruiting children. But these days it's much more common to hear, of course I love gay people. Some of my best friends struggle with same-sex attraction, but it's not homophobic to not want LGBT ideology promoted in schools to children as young as 3 years old. Why, it's a full-on assault on religious liberty. I make a convincing homophobe, don't I? There's really two different styles of bigotry. They express the same prejudice, but they're very different in tone. I'll call the two styles direct bigotry and indirect bigotry. Direct bigotry is openly contemptuous. It's a bigotry manifested in slurs and outright discrimination and demonizing the target group, and calls for shunning, subordination, or even violence. Whereas indirect bigotry manifests as concern or debate about a host of proxy issues. It's often defensive in tone rather than offensive. Frequently the claim is that a once needed liberation movement has now gone too far, that it's now the activists who are the new oppressors, who are disturbing law and order with violent and chaotic protests, who are victimizing and silencing innocent people by calling them bigots, who are infiltrating the media and replacing good old-fashioned entertainment with politically correct propaganda. And of course, ordinary people are too intimidated to speak speak out against it, because cancel culture is out of control and free speech is under attack. The direct bigot is always frothing at the mouth, ranting and raving about predators, perverts, invaders, rapists, brutish animals, vermin, rats, roaches, contagions. Whereas the indirect bigot is always defending something, always a knight in shining armor, defending women, defending the children, defending marriage, defending freedom, defending the family, defending our values, defending common sense, defending tradition, defending civilization itself, defending God. He's all powerful, but he could really use your help, Mary. I think a lot of people take a borderline heroic view of themselves. And indirect bigotry flatters that self-image. Indirect bigotry often replaces the actual people it targets with some big abstract concept. Instead of Jewish people, they claim to be against Zionist-occupied government. Instead of women, they claim to hate feminazis or the friend zone. Gay people are depersonified as the gay agenda. Trans people become transgenderism, gender ideology, trans activists. What they're really against is equality, but they don't say that. In fact, they may not even think it.
One of the biggest problems with people that are, she might get into this, the people that do kind of like the stealth bigotry or whatever, is it's hard to tell if somebody is knowingly doing it versus if somebody is like, that's just the way they are and they don't necessarily mean anything by it. That was one of the issues that I had last night when I was talking to Rob and John. I don't think the John guy, I don't know, but I don't think he's like a crazy conspiratorial, thinks Democrats are trying to like murder people. The Rob guy, however, does think that. But both of them outwardly will appear similar because Rob will play dumb, but it's hard to tell if Rob is just playing dumb or if he's just trying to be a little bit more undercover about his actual position. It's kind of annoying.
But they tell on themselves when they react with instinctive hostility to anyone who agitates for change. It's not racist to think that Black Lives Matter thugs shouldn't disrespect the national anthem. A book called The Anatomy of Prejudices by Elizabeth Young Brule really helped me with this video. One of the points she makes is that a lot of the time, bigotry is backlash.
Ideologies of desire are, generally, backlashes against movements of equality. They are regressive prejudices that reinstate inequalities and distinctions when the force of movements for equality has been registered and, often unconsciously, rejected. Prejudice replaces social barriers of another kind.
Bigotry is not just the psychological state of hating a group of people. Bigotry is political. It's a reaction to changing demographics, or to liberation movements, or to changing power relations between groups. A lot of casual misogynists don't exactly hate women in the literal psychological sense. It's more that they feel threatened by the prospect of the social and political equality of women. In fact, I would argue that feeling threatened is the distinctive psychological experience of bigotry, much more so than feeling hateful. So bigotry is reactive, and it changes along with the circumstances it's a reaction to. 1950s misogyny still has some things in common with 2020s misogyny. For example, a lot of men still feel some need to control women's sexuality and women's bodies, but it's also changed a lot as gender relations have shifted in the last 70 years. The idea that women are naturally suited to domestic servitude is a lot less prevalent than it used to be, and transphobia is a prejudice that's getting much louder.
Do you really believe people feel threatened? Yeah, sometimes actually I do. I actually think a lack of security and people feeling threatened can be a big explanation for why some people are so opposed to certain things. And it's I've had to learn a lot about this. Because like, for instance, so for me, I generally don't care what other people do. I generally don't feel threatened by other people living in a certain way. So it's hard for me to imagine sometimes why other people will get so fucking upset if somebody else is like gay or trans. But I think the problem is that for a lot of people, it's not enough that they want to live their own individual lives and that they want to have their own individual like ideas about things. They need to feel like the society around them supports and reinforces that. So if you have an idea of like what a man should look like or what a man should act like or how a man should be, and society is sending conflicting signals about that, you're not secure enough in your own definition of what it means for you to be a man or what masculinity means, because now that society is giving you a bit of a conflicting view view on it, you feel the need to change society to conform with your own views. So I do think that if a conflicting message is given in society about what something is or ought to be, and you disagree with that, some people can't live with that dissonance, or they can't live with that disagreement, and they need to force society to kind of bend to their own personal takes. That's how it feels to me. I could be wrong, maybe people don't, but I'm pretty confident in that.
As in the last decade, trans liberation has increased our visibility. People are running into us at work now. They're having to use our pronouns. They're seeing us in politics or in media, and not just as laughingstocks or monsters like we used to be, but as actual characters. And a lot of people are not very happy about it. They feel threatened. That must be super fucking hard for you. Prejudice replaces social barriers of another kind. So JK Rowling frames her position as, I am just saying the fact that sex is real. It's not hateful to say a fact. Why is everyone so mad at me? A fact can't be bigoted. And I agree that a fact cannot be bigoted, but a fact on its own doesn't mean very much. Usually when we discuss facts, we're using those facts to tell a story. And facts can be used to tell bigoted stories, you know.
So something that's very important here, and I've gotten a better perspective on this actually because of somebody introduced me to the concept of historiography, right? So when you are reading something or studying like history, you never actually study every single fucking fact related to some event, but instead you're reading some kind of facts that have been laid out to present like a certain story, right? Now, so this is the difference between like history and historiography, right? Is when we tell a story, we tell it from like a particular perspective, right? So if I want to read about like World War II, or if I want to read about like the Civil War, right? And let's say I start studying, I'm not going to get the name of every single person that's involved in this conflict, right? Instead, I'm going to get the names of a few particular people. Now, whose names we decide to talk about is a process that we're engaging in where we're already changing the presentation of the information to tell a particular story from a particular perspective. And it's super ultra important to recognize that there is some degree of subjectivity or some exercise in philosophy that happens when you begin to selectively present facts. It's one of the reasons why it's so frustrating when somebody says, facts can't be racist. Well, sure, they can't be, but the facts that you present are going to be selected based on a particular reason, and that reason might be racist. Like you can tell a whole bunch of facts that aren't wrong or bigoted, but you can put together facts to make a bigoted story. You can put together facts to make a racist story, or facts to make hateful or evil or whatever. Or even you can put together certain facts to be misleading or to give somebody an incorrect picture, even though the facts are all correct. The idea that unless you're literally working in fucking computer databases or some shit that's just amalgamating every piece of information ever, like there's some selectiveness that goes on with the type of information that we're looking at. And it's important to understand that selective way of looking at information is going to going to change the way you view things. And that process is very subjective. Anytime somebody pretends that they're like some ultimate purveyor of objective truth and blah, 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 like you should be careful about that.
Suppose someone tweets the fact that the homicide rate is higher for Black Americans than white Americans. I'm gonna ask, what story are you trying to tell with this fact? What political goal are you trying to support? One way indirect bigotry works is by camouflaging political struggles as intellectual debates. When Joanne says sex is real, she sounds like she's staking out a position in the trans debate, which is then presented as an intellectual conflict about the metaphysics of gender, instead of what it really is, which is a political conflict about the social equality of transgender people. And the effectiveness of that—
Is there no truth we can point towards then on any given point, or am I dumb? Kind of. I think it's just important to recognize that we're starting from a subjective frame of reference where we can't analyze every single particular thing. It's kind of like when we do the portal debate, right? Well, what object is truly stationary and what object is truly moving in any particular frame of reference? Well, it depends on what you're looking at, right? Like from the perspective of a spaceship, The spaceship is stationary, and Earth is the one moving away from it. Earth and the rest of the solar system are moving in a particular way from it, right? From the frame of reference of the planet Earth, the spaceship is moving away from the planet, right? It's the same when we talk about like presenting or talking about any particular set of facts, right? Like, well, facts exist, and they can be hopefully true, depending on what your theory of truth is, right? Hopefully, facts can be true, but just because you're presenting true facts doesn't mean that the story that you're making with those facts is some objectively true story. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
That strategy is actually a reason I'm not a huge fan of the slogan, trans women are women. And this is just my opinion. I don't speak for any other
Oh, fuck. Is Natalie about to get fucking destroyed for this? I haven't seen any of the responses to her video yet.
Trans people, but there's a couple things I don't like about it. One is trans men and non-binary people matter just as much as trans women, but you don't as often hear trans men are men, or non-binary people are valid. Doesn't really work, does it? The other problem with trans women are women is it tends to invite the response, well, what does it even mean to be a woman? Define womanhood. And now you're immediately getting baited into some bullshit semantic debate about what is a real woman. A real woman. How do you know you're a real woman, Amber? What if you're in the Matrix right now, and in the real world, you're biologically male? The tables are turned. It doesn't really matter, does it? This is metaphysics, and life is too short for metaphysics. You know, I've been down this road too many times already, and I always end up having these dead-end conversations about gender performativity, or worse, conversations about what it means to feel like a woman. Well, the truth is, I don't feel like a woman. I don't think anyone feels like a woman, honestly, except a certain subgenre of gay men, and possibly Shania Twain. Probably not even her anymore, honestly. Not since the early 2000s. You know, some questions should be dissolved rather than solved. That's what Wittgenstein said. That's right, we're dragging Ludwig into this. Sometimes the only way to answer a question is to realize you're asking the wrong question. How do I know I'm a woman? Well, look at me. Oh. I rest my case. The monitor's over here. That's what I'm looking at when I look over here. I like to check in occasionally, see how I'm doing. Look, trans people can't even agree among ourselves what gender is. In fact, if you even try to answer the question, you end up enraging some part of the community who feels excluded. So no, trans people are not trying to force an ideology on people. We don't even share an ideology within our own community. What we share are a common set of political struggles against discrimination, against harassment, against excessive medical gatekeeping, against exclusion from public life. So what would be a better slogan than trans women are women? Well, ideally, something that includes all trans people and something that evades pointless philosophizing about biology and what is gender and who is true trans and what is a woman really. Something that centers what actually matters, which is freeing trans people from the stigma and discrimination that have historically prevented us from becoming equal members of society. So I know it sounds kind of outdated, very 1970s, but I personally like the slogan, trans liberation now. It's short, it's sweet, and instead of prompting, define womanhood, it prompts people to ask, what do you mean liberation? Liberation from what? And then you can say, well, I'll tell you. And now you're talking about politics instead of talking about semantics. Isn't that better? I feel like trans culture is just so obsessed with reassuring ourselves that we are valid that we sometimes forget that the end goal of a political movement is not validity, it's equality. That's what we're supposed to be fighting for. So instead of asking, does JK Rowling think we're valid, which like, who fucking cares if she thinks we're valid? Well, maybe I care a little bit. But instead, why don't we ask, is she or is she not an ally in our struggle for equality? Doesn't that just bring reality back into focus? Isn't it so much better to have a concrete political project in front of you instead of sinking into this scholastic gender theology? Trans people are a population of people who have a right to equality and to freedom from discrimination. We are not an ideology that's up for debate. But that's how JK Rowling frames the trans question, not as a struggle for equality that she opposes, but as an ideology that she disagrees with. I'm just saying that sex is real. Is that all you're saying, Joanne? Remember that scene in the
Holy shit, Contrapoints confirmed. Gonna be streaming on Twitch soon? I'm so sorry.
Goblet of Fire in the prefect's bathroom? Moaning Myrtle, hey, how are you? I wonder if that inspired my love of baths. This bath is actually really nice. It's a lot of milk and a lot of rose oil, Epsom salts, just kind of everything that's good in baths all together. I don't want to talk about bigotry. I want to talk about baths. Can this just be a video about baths from now on? Oh, fine, I'll do my job. On June 10, JK Rowling published an essay to her website, which on Twitter she titled Turf Wars.
Oh God, if this is the one we read, I think this was the one where like halfway in, it's like, yeah, this is actually chill. I feel good that she stuck to her position on this better. And then I think she just goes full fucking turf. Like, oh God, what are you doing? Oh no.
Which was just awarded the Russell Prize by the BBC for its brave display of unyielding transphobia, I guess. The essay is several pages long and outlines her reasons for speaking out on sex and gender issues.
I refuse to bow down to a movement that I believe is doing demonstrable harm in seeking to erode women as a political and biological class and offering to cover predators like few before it.
We should, should we read this? I think we read the essay on stream, and it was actually, I feel like the intro to the essay, the first few paragraphs was like pretty good. And then she just jumps off the deep end, and it's like, oh my God. Yikes.
Where do I even begin with this one? Well, let's pick some highlights.
Woman is not a costume. Woman is not an idea in a man's head. Woman is not a pink brain, a liking for Jimmy Choos, or any of the other sexist ideas now somehow touted as progressive.
Oh, well, my mistake. Here I was, thinking I was a woman. Turns out I'm just a man who likes expensive shoes. What a whimsical misunderstanding. Okay, well, that's it, everyone. The channel's over. Thanks for the likes and comments. I'm gonna head out now to the Jimmy Choo store, and then I guess I'll cut my tits off. Joanne! Joanne! This is madness, Joanne.
When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and, as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside.
So look, I understand that some women are anxious about the...
I still feel like the easiest way to solve this problem, the easiest way to make everybody walk back on this, is to just get some big, burly trans men and just march them into women's dressing rooms. Like, I feel like people would change their opinion in literally one encounter, where you have a big, burly, fucking facial hair trans man is in the changing room, and then a cis woman is like, "What the fuck are you doing in here, you piece of shit?" And like, "Oh, well, I have a vagina. I'm a trans man, but I have a vagina, so you said we should go to our own dressing room, so I'm just gonna chill in here with you. Is that cool?" Like, I feel like you would flip them immediately. The strange thing when you talk about trans issues, and also trans people, at least online, are very guilty of this too. Trans people and cis people never talk about trans men. They don't exist to anybody, literally. I don't know why that is the case. But when it comes to cis people arguing about whether or not like trans women should be allowed in bathrooms, they're always talking about trans women. They're always talking about men who biological sex male or whatever that identify as female, that identify as women. That's the only thing that trans people talk about. Or I'm sorry, that's the only thing that cis people talk about. And then when trans people talk about issues, they only ever talk about trans women. They never talk about trans men. So for instance, when we talk about like Olympics, right? Trans people are very quick to point out, oh, well, trans women should be allowed to compete with cis women. Trans women should be allowed to compete with cis women. It's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do about trans men? Because trans men will never be competitive in anything ever. A trans male is probably never going to be able to compete at the highest levels with a cis male. Are you just gonna fuck that whole group of people? Like, literally nobody ever talks about trans men ever. Like, it's very weird to me. I don't know why, but yeah. It's almost like it would be interesting if the reason is because like toxic masculinity and patriarchy even carries into trans discussions, but yeah.
Thought of predators in bathrooms. And believe me, I don't want to share a bathroom with a predator any more than you do. Why are all my rose petals on this one side? Some of them need to come over here. Come here. I've redistributed the petals. Socialist icon. But this talking point that gender change on legal documents will enable predators to enter bathrooms, it doesn't really make sense because gender policing in public bathrooms doesn't involve legal documents. Like, when was the last time you had to present a gender certificate to gain admittance to a public bathroom?
No.
It feels like a strangely outdated conversation to be having during pandemic lockdown. Like,
this is also really weird, and I don't know if other like European countries or whatever do this, but like
you can now click the thumbnail button in the lower left corner of the screen.
I hate this guy. I actually hate you.
Planet view mode.
Like I know the very least in Sweden, like they have mixed bathrooms and like nobody cares. Nobody loses their mind. Like, I don't know why we can't just do this in other countries. Like, just who the fuck cares? Like, who's in whose bathroom? Like, people talk about bathrooms like they're some weird fucking like rapist force field. Like, you're a woman and you're running through a fucking school and some guy's trying to rape you and you just run into the bathroom and you're safe. It's like, oh, thank God, my safe haven, the women's restroom. Like, nobody can hurt me here. Like, it's such a weird fucking way of like viewing restrooms. Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. Like, this idea that like we have mixed restrooms or something, everybody's gonna start raping and killing each other is just so mind-bogglingly fucking stupid. Oh my God.
Like, imagine using a public bathroom. Imagine being in public.
What do you mean by shared bathroom? Like women, so like at least in Sweden, there'll be these big rooms and then in the big room, there'll be like a door behind every bathroom and then there'll be like sinks out in the public area. And like you just enter the door and you use the bathroom. Like at least in Stockholm, I don't know, maybe in other places. And it seemed like, I don't know. The first time I went in, I got scared because I saw a woman walk out one. I was like, fuck, am I in the wrong area? But it was just, no, it's just like a unisex bathroom. It's just not a big deal.
I've been reading this book called Female Masculinity, which is about the experiences of butch women. And there's a section here called The Bathroom Problem, which describes how women's bathrooms
tend to operate as an area for the enforcement of gender conformity.
The author, Jack Halberstam, who's assigned female at birth and presents masculine, describes routinely having security called on him for using the women's bathroom.
Having one's gender challenged in the women's restroom is a frequent occurrence in the lives of many androgynous or masculine women. Indeed, it is so frequent that one wonders whether the category woman, when used to designate public functions, is completely outmoded. Queer literature is littered with references to the bathroom problem, and it would not be an exaggeration to call it a standard feature of the butch narrative.
And that's very interesting to me because as a feminine trans woman, I have not once been questioned or had the authorities called on me in a women's public bathroom, and the entire time I've been using them, which...
Yep, and then imagine seeing somebody like Natalie in the male bathroom. You'd be like, what the fuck are you doing here? This is wrong. Like, people never think through any of this. Trans issues are unreal. Like, it's such a good way to expose somebody that's like spent like any amount of time thinking about any of these issues whatsoever. It's especially funny when you run into like a facts over feelings. Some of the stuff I was getting Sargon to like admit to, which props to Sargon, at least he was actually owning his positions. But like, when Sargon is literally saying things, because I'm asking him like, wait a second, you think that like being a woman means like being able to give children? What about like an infertile woman? Does this challenge that category at all? And he's like, well, I guess they're less of a woman then if they can't do that. And I was like, wait, oh, okay. I didn't know you were actually gonna bite the bullet on that one. Well, hold on, now I gotta stop and think for a moment. Like, Jesus. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.
You have to understand that principles all contradict each other at some point.
No, they don't. Wait,
Of
hold
course
on.
they do.
Wait. Is that what you believe?